After leaving Marla in the last episode, we made our way to the South Australian Northern Territory border, and are these wildflowers we found as we made our way onto the Lambert Centre. From the Lambert Centre, we crossed back into South Australia again and refuelled at Mount Dare, and from Mount Dare we went on to Dalhousie Hot Springs and had a swim. From Dalhousie was when we started to see some sandhills, as well as that we started to see some desert wildlife. I'm Mick, and this is Sally. Together we've been caravanning Australia since the 1980s, and more recently we started to put the videos together just to show you some of what we see out there. There's a lot to see in Australia, and we hope you enjoy what we have here to show you. You can follow us on our trips via the following social media platforms. If you like the following video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Coming up in this episode, we finally see some real sandhills, and as well as that we do a few minor vehicle repairs. We head down and have a look at the lone gum tree, and then we make our way back to the French line. As we travel the French line, we find the need to get the snatch strap out. As we continue, we reach Poeppel Corner, and from there we travel on before setting up camp and enjoying a barbecue for tea. All that and more in episode 3 of our Simpson Desert crossing. Like all our mornings so far on this trip, it was a beautiful sunrise, cold, no wind, and just eager to get that fire going. Yeah, good morning everyone, and we're starting day 8 today, and yesterday we travelled a bit over 100 kilometres, and that puts us something like, just under 100 kilometres in the actual Simpson Desert, I think it is. So we push on further and chase a few more sandhills today, and find another nice spot like this one. It's pretty chilly this morning, very cold on the hands. Sally's making a cup of coffee now, so that'll get the innards a bit warmer, and we'll catch you during the day. With the cold mornings that we're having each day in the desert, it was certainly nice to see that fire going in the morning. With the 3 boxes of wood that Greg brought from home, it certainly made it easier when we're burning the fire in the desert, knowing that we weren't permitted to collect wood from within the desert, and that supplemented the wood that we carried in from outside. Once everyone had finished their breakfast and we're all packed up, it was time to start to hit the road again. And it was always in the back of your mind whether someone was going to get stuck on a sandhill, and that would be half the fun and half the memories are created trying to help someone get over a sandhill where they're bogged in the sand. Of the 1,100 sand dunes that are required to be crossed when you do a Simpson Desert crossing, some of those dunes are as long as 200 kilometres in length. Unfortunately, the camera doesn't show it as good as what I hoped it was going to, but when you look one way, the sand on the road is a different colour from when you look up the other way. When we were here back in 2007, with very little vegetation on the sand dunes at that stage, you could look one way at sunset and see the sand would be orange to almost yellow in colour, and then when you turned around and look at the sand dune on the opposite side, it'd almost be a brown to a tanny colour, and it was so different in the comparison of the two directions and colours. It was certainly good on this trip to see the desert looking so healthy, but in our opinion, probably back in 2007, it was more appealing as a desert because one expects a desert to be bare and barren and not grassed over like it is at the moment. We found our travels on the desert pretty slow on this trip, and the road was undulating and up and down. Not so much that the sandhills were difficult to get over because most of them were fairly hard ground and certainly hard sand, not soft sand that we were bogging into, but just because of the up and down on the ground, very slow. Now arriving at the junction of the French line and the Arabina road, and that's where we turn right to go down the Arabina road that takes us down to the Lone Gum Tree. After a bit of a walk around and a group discussion here, we were soon back on the road, and now that we're travelling between the sand dunes, the road was much flatter and the road speed certainly picked up from what we were doing in between sandhills. As we follow the road around to the right here, it starts to take us back towards more sandhills. As Kerry come up over the sand dune that's up in front of us now, the 200 series Land Cruiser dropped the bash plate, and although not totally gone, it was ready to let go. After a quick inspection, we soon realised that we could bolt the bash plate back up into its position, just a matter of finding the bolts that we needed to do the job. While the fellas were bolting the bash plate back up in position, some of the girls thought they'd do a bit of an exercise routine up on top of the sandhill. With the bash plate now bolted up in position and the girls fully exercised, we made our way onto the Lone Gum Tree. Very interesting to see a tree like this all on its own within the desert, and there's no real explanation that we're aware of, and certainly wasn't on this sign that's coming up now, that really explains how it got there. Nature can sometimes work in very mysterious ways, and perhaps this is going to be one mystery that'll never be solved. It was now around the middle of the day, so we decided whilst we were here at the Lone Gum Tree that we'd stop and enjoy lunch before moving on. Although we had heard a little bit of chatter on Channel 10 on the UHF radio during the trip so far, we were a little surprised that we hadn't seen more traffic on the desert tracks than what we had. Social media certainly had a lot of talk and a lot of people doing these sort of trips, but to date we'd seen very few people. Once we'd left the Lone Gum Tree, we made our way to Knowles Track, and it was along that track that we followed to head back towards the French line. As we made our way along the Knowles track heading north, once again we found ourselves travelling between sandhills. At times, as well as running between the sandhills, we found ourselves up on top of them. As we were heading north along the Knowles track, there weren't too many campsites that we found that were suitable to cater for the number of vehicles that we had, even though it was only 5. There were other campsites there that we did see, but suitable for 1 or 2 vehicles, not the numbers that we had. As our group came over the top and down the side of the sandhill to this open clearing here, we thought, yep, we'll have that one, that would do us nicely for a camp. It certainly was a big open, flat, clear space, this one, and suitable for any number of campers. Once everyone had their campsite set up, it was time to sit around the fire, relax, let the flies go to bed, and just enjoy the evening. We did have Starlink with us on this trip, and from time to time around the fire you'll see people looking at a mobile phone. But what we did do, we limited the time for the Starlink to be working for a half hour each night, and that gave people opportunity to do anything they wanted to do on social media, and as well as that, people back home knew what that half hour time slot was, and they could ring us should anyone need to be contacted. Yeah, good morning everyone, and we're starting day 9 this morning, and when we got here yesterday it was about 4 o'clock, and very open, clean campground this one, and lucky we got here because just after we got started to set up, along comes another group of 8 or 9, and they must have been here before because they were looking for this spot and a little bit disappointed on the UHF radio that they couldn't get here, but never mind. So they're not far up the track from us. We can see them as I'm standing here, and a very cold night again last night, but today we'll go on. We'll probably get through to Poeppel Corner, but just depends on how the day goes, and into Birdsville tomorrow night. So see how we go. As we left our campsite this morning and started heading up towards the French line, from time to time we could hear the group of 9 vehicles that were camped not far from us talking on the UHF radio, and from what we could work out, they were travelling about the same speed as what we were. At times it was very slow going. As you can see here, some of these white large rocks that were buried in the road, you had to drive over them. You couldn't get around them, but they were okay to drive on as long as you were prepared to slow up for them. Now back at the French line where the Knowles track comes up and joins onto it, and it's here that we do that right hand turn and start to head towards Poeppel Corner. We did this trip leaving home on the 16th of August on 2023, and so of course the trip goes over the last 2 weeks of August, and we could not have had better weather for our trip. Even though it was cold during the night, particularly in the mornings as the sun come up, during the day like it is now with this blue sky and the sun shining, you couldn't have asked for better temperatures. We had a few more of these white rocks to dodge for a while, but they didn't last long and they were soon gone. With nothing but more sandhills in front of us, it was time to play in the sand again. The further we travelled east, the more we found the sandhills were being cut up, and that made for slow going. To make the ride a much smoother one as we went over the sandhills, you always approach them as slow as you could get them, and hopefully knowing that you'll get over the top, but not always. With the known required faster speed to get up the sandhill without bogging, Paul was on his second go here and quite easily got over, even though it was a much bouncier ride. Driving a vehicle with an automatic transmission on this trip certainly made it much easier than when we were here in 2007 with a vehicle with a manual gearbox. As we were travelling in convoy in this trip, the vehicle behind the one in front always left plenty of room, particularly when you're going up a sandhill like we are now. So should that vehicle in front not make it up, he's got plenty of room to reverse back down the sandhill and then to have the opportunity to take a second run at it. With the large number of sandhills in the desert, the distance between the sandhills isn't consistent. Sometimes you'll go across 2 sandhills or even 3 in a very short period of time, and then there'll be a great distance between the next 2 sandhills. As we head east over the sandhills, our climb is much longer and flatter than what it is when you crest the hill here, and look at it if you're coming from the east, it's much shorter and steeper. Coming up very shortly, when we crest this sandhill, you'll see an example of how far apart the sand dunes are, with the next sand dune that we've got to cross over once we get to the top of this one, some distance down the road. As we come over the top of this sandhill and make our way around the side of it, we've been radioed from ahead in our convoy that there's a vehicle waiting down on the salt pan, and he'll stay there until we come through, because of course much easier to sit and wait for someone to come through when you're in the ideal location versus trying to meet them halfway up the side of a sandhill when someone's got to go off and no doubt get stuck in the sand. This fella here was travelling on his own, and we wish him well on his journey. It was that time again when it was time to pull up and enjoy the beautiful weather and stop and have something to eat for lunch. This trip is actually taking us longer than what we originally planned for, although we did leave some days up our sleeve just on the off chance that it was a little bit longer. But you've got to have stops like this so you can sit back and relax and smell the roses, as they say. On the move again after lunch, and it was at this part of the day that we started to see some of the bigger sand hills on the trip, and unfortunately for Jo, she never quite made it up on this one. After a couple of attempts at this one, we decided to get the snatch strap out and help her over the top, but all good fun. Once we had the snatch strap all set up and everything in place, we made our move and we soon had her up over the rise. Paul in the D-Max, he was loaded with quite a lot of weight here, and unfortunately he suffered the same fate that Jo did, and he never made it over. Once again it was out with the snatch straps, and Paul was soon over the top as well, and it was only at this point in our entire trip that we got the snatch straps out, so all in all I think everyone did quite well. You could say I cheated a bit because I was up there helping everyone come over the rise, but I'd had enough eyesight and see what was going on that I knew what speed was needed to get over. We crossed over a number of these salt pans on this trip, and it's something that you need to be wary of. If there's been some previous rain just prior to when you're going to cross one of these, it becomes very sticky because there was a lot of telltale bog marks that showed us that some people had either got caught or nearly got caught in the mud. It was at this stage that Paul noticed that the D-Max appeared as though it was getting low in fuel, although he didn't actually expect it to be that low, and he wasn't sure whether he had a fuel gauge issue or what the situation was, but everything was all good. So being as we were stopped, he decided to put a bit of fuel in the D-Max, and while he was doing that he put some more in Jo's Triton. Once we got going again, it wasn't very long and we're at Poeppel Corner. Now Poeppel Corner is the intersection between three states, and that's South Australia, the Northern Territory and Queensland, and the boundaries are depicted on the top of this post on this plaque here. The afternoon was moving on and it was time to leave Poeppel Corner, and once we got going after leaving there, our eyes were open for a suitable camp location for that night. From Poeppel Corner to our next camp location, the ground was reasonably long and flat, and there were no sand dunes that we had to contend with at all. It was a bit over a half hour's driving from Poeppel Corner, and we soon found this clearing that we set up camp on. It was a very warm day out in the sunshine today, and it was nice to be able to sit in a bit of shade. Nearly all of the sunsets that we viewed on this trip, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, but it still made for a very colourful, nice orange tinge on the horizon above the campsite. There were a number of motorbikes crossing the Simpson whilst we were there, and on this occasion at this campsite 3 went up the road while we were sitting around talking. A lot of memories can be made on a trip like this for various reasons, and they could be during the drive when you're trying to get up a sand hill and someone has to help you with a snatch strap, or something else that may happen along the way, but some of those memories are also made up of sitting around a campfire like this one tonight as the sun goes down in the west. Everyone was cooking their tea on the barbecues tonight, so we had the fire going well and truly to try and get enough coals that we could drag out later on to put onto the barbecue plates. As the day slowly draws to an end and we get ready to cook our tea on the wood barbecue, it brings an end to this video, so we'll catch you in the next series. In the fourth and final part of this Crossing the Simpson Desert series, we give Greg a hand to get over a sandhill before arriving at Air Creek, where we spend the night. We'll cross those final sand dunes as we make our way towards Big Red. After taking our vehicles to the top of Big Red, we'll go down the Birdsville track and have a look at some of the remaining water that's on the track. And we spend our last 2 nights in the picturesque Flinders Ranges. If you like the video that you just watched, give us a thumbs up, and if you want to see more of our videos, click on the subscribe button, and once you've done that, change the bell notification to all. That way every time that we do uploads to our YouTube channel, you'll be notified.